We got to have these conversations out loud together amongst Christians, amongst the church, saying, how can we do this together? Because families need the church and the church needs families. And then when it comes to individual families, I think there's a lot of things we can do. I think the very first thing we need to do is delay entry.
I'm so glad we're talking about this subject of kids and social media and technology. This is such an important topic. What led you and your wife to start Maven? First of all, why do you call it Maven, and what's it all about?
Yeah, well, a Maven, it's actually a Yiddish word. It refers to someone who's knowledgeable or an expert in some field and then seeks to pass that on to others. So you could have a fashion Maven or a finance Maven.
A guru of sorts.
Exactly, and we want to be Mavens of Christian truth and pass that on to the next generation. And so there's two aspects to that. One, we care about the next generation in discipling young people, and also equipping those who are discipling young people. So equipping parents and grandparents and pastors and church leaders and home educators and Christian educators and on and on and on. And so that's why we started Maven, because we've just seen the cultural pressure increase and the secularization of our culture. And so parents are faced with challenges at every turn in terms of discipling their young people. And so that's why we started Maven.
When technology hit us as a culture like a tidal wave, and all of a sudden everybody's got smartphones, all of a sudden social media is here, and we're thinking differently, we're processing life differently, that was a big shift. Have we got that figured out now, or is technology continuing to evolve? Are we still on our heels with all this stuff?
Yeah, we definitely don't have it figured out. I think we can look at the anxiety and the depression and the rates of suicide and self-harm that we see particularly in young people. And you can go back about 10 years. Around 2011, 2012, there seems to be this beginning of this increase in all of these things with our young people, and particularly in girls. And from that point till now, we have seen the rates of anxiety and depression, self-harm, all of these things increase exponentially. So let's take girls from about 15 to 19, right? Since around 2012, there's been, over a 60% increase in hospitalizations from self-harm. And now, so that's one indicator. Now, if you drop that down to 10 to 14-year-olds, that number since 2012, 2013 has increased about 180%. And this isn't self-reporting. This is actual documentation from hospitals of these kids who have come in for self-harm. We're seeing the rates of anxiety and depression all increase. Now, what happens around that time is that smartphones kind of become ubiquitous, right? They start to be everywhere, and kids now, since that time, all grow up now with smartphones. So since about middle school now, we have a generation, Gen Z, who have grown up with these things. And so Jean Twenge, a psychologist, alerted us to this back in 2017. Now, she only had a few years of data, and so she got a lot of criticism on this and a lot of pushback saying, oh, it's not, there's a correlation here, but that doesn't mean causation. Just because, around the same time they're getting smartphones and then access to social media doesn't mean that this is the cause. Well, now, 5 years after she wrote this article in The Atlantic called "Are Smartphones Destroying a Generation?" we have more data, and we don't see any correction. We just see that those stats increasing in terms of the mental health of our young people. And I think when we think about the nature of technology, it helps us to understand why this is causation, why this is having the kind of impact it's having on our young people. Technology is not neutral. I think about a car, for instance. You have different gears. You can put your car in drive, you can put your car in reverse, and it's going to move. But if you put your car in neutral, it's going to stand still. Technology doesn't have a neutral gear. And what that means is that by our very use of technology, it's moving us in a direction. It's always nudging us. So that means that just by using a smartphone, just by using a social media platform, it has the power to influence you. It's always trying to nudge you and shape you and move you. And this is, I mean, we see this with, smartphone addiction, technology addiction, where we're on these things more and more and more because they're constantly nudging us to be on those things more and more. Now, when you look at something like social media, right, there's a couple of things to think about when it comes to social media. Number one, social media for our young people, and even for us adults now, is often, it's just constantly staging the world, right? So it's staging the world, and so it's telling us what is, but also it's telling us what should be. It's presenting to us what is the norm, whether we realize it or not. And that is the way that culture most powerfully shapes us, just by presenting to us what is normal.
That's right.
And then we absorb it, and then we go along with it. So now we have a generation of young people who, for the last 8, 10 years, have just been socialized by this medium, by social media, telling them what's normal. And what is it telling them? Right? Well, we are in this decadent culture, a narcissistic culture, a culture where the individual is king, the individual is God, and everything therefore needs to cater to the individual, their wants, their desires. And so now happiness is the satisfaction of any desire you have. And so whether it's clothes or food or traveling, it's whatever pleasurable experiences that you can have, this is going to bring satisfaction. This is going to bring joy and happiness.
Right.
And that's just being presented as the norm. So then our kids are materialistic, they're consumeristic, they're pursuing these kinds of things because it's just constantly staging the world. And so there's this other aspect where it gets reinforced by this system on social media of likes and followers, right? Facebook, when they invented the like button and introduced that onto their social media platform, I think that changed things. So now it's not just I'm posting this picture of me, whatever I'm doing or whatever I'm wearing, but now there's this reinforcement of it. And so depending on what I post, I get more likes, I get more followers. And so there's this feedback mechanism. And so now think about this for a young person. Like for you or me, older, maybe a little more stable in our identity, right, hopefully. This isn't going to have as much of an impact, but you take a 15-year-old who's in the middle of their identity formation. They're trying to figure out, who am I? What makes me valuable? Why should people love me, right? You put that young person who's unstable and insecure, like we all were, and you put them into that social media world where now they're getting feedback for the things that the world takes to be valuable. And so let's take a young girl. She posts an ordinary picture, maybe out somewhere, and she gets a few likes or whatever. But then let's say she posts a picture where she's maybe in her bikini. She's wearing something that would be considered, more sexy. And there's more likes, right? Well, she's probably not thinking necessarily explicitly about that, but she notices, oh gosh, when I post this, I get more likes. And so you can see how that might nudge a girl to begin to post certain things because she's going to get more positive feedback on that. It gets more followers. And just take that's just one example of many examples. And so this is how social media so powerfully shapes us.
So what do you think we do about that, especially as parents and as grandparents? Where do you think we start with that kind of thinking?
We have to reason through this with our kids. So I think the first thing to do is to have intelligent conversations with our kids about this kind of stuff and not just say, well, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, and then not give them any of the reasoning, especially when they're in middle school and high school. By this time, they've reached a level of cognitive development where they need us to give them reasons. I think a second thing we need to do is we have to find allies in this. Because I know a lot of parents, I'm the parent of 5 kids myself. I've been navigating this. And it's difficult because you feel like you're in it alone. Like it's me and my kids. And I may be one of the only parents that my kids know, right, when they look at their friends' parents, who's putting any kind of limits on this, who's raising the alarm, who's issuing some concerns about this. And if that's the case, it just makes it so much more difficult because they look around and it's like, well, hey, Jeff's mom and dad, they don't have any of these rules, and he can be on whenever he wants, and this kind of thing. And so what we need allies in this. We need not just moms and dads, we need grandmas and grandpas, we need aunts and uncles, and particularly we need the church. We need the larger church, we need youth groups to kind of ally on this issue. And so for example, like when my kid goes to youth group on a Wednesday night, and every kid out there, at youth group has their smartphones, and they're on their smartphones constantly. Well, then it's just the norm. It's no different.
Yeah.
It's the same culture that they find at the local school campus. And so again, that's going to shape them. But what we've seen in our church is that our youth group will put limits. And so, hey, when we go on a mission trip or we go to camp, you don't even bring that thing. And so what it does is it creates an alternative culture. So not only is my home this alternative culture to the larger culture, but then they have another place where there's some safety in this, the youth group or or church, and if they've got a group of friends whose parents are kind of all allied on this. I've seen that as well. The kids don't experience the power of that social pressure like they do if everyone around them's kind of on the same page. So this is, I think, where we got to have these conversations out loud together amongst Christians, amongst the church, saying, how can we do this together? Because families need the church and the church needs families. And then when it comes to individual families, I think there's a lot of things we can do. I think the very first thing we need to do is delay entry. Delay entry. Start this thing as late as you can for your kids. And you know what? Your 8, 9, 10-year-old may be coming home saying, hey, all my friends have a smartphone. All my friends are on Instagram. All my friends are on TikTok. And this is the thing I would say to my kid. Look, I love you and I want to protect you from the harm that we're seeing in the culture. The rates of mental health disorders and anxiety in young people has absolutely skyrocketed. Young people are unhappier than they've ever been. And this is the kind of thing we need to say to our kids to help delay that entry. And then if we've got people around us who are doing the same thing, that makes it easier. And so delay entry as long as possible. And then once they get it, come up with some good boundaries that you can agree on.